Facebook. Welcome to Veterans Breakfast Club. We're going to be having an open conversation by committee tonight. You can see Brad, Glenn, Ben, and myself. We're going to be asking questions and having a nice old conversation and time here. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. We're going to get the music started and let everybody in. Welcome to Veterans Breakfast Club for Monday, February 2nd, our first program of the month of February. My name is Sean Hall. I'm Director of Programming with the Veterans Breakfast Club. It's great to see you all here this evening. We have a great show planned for you tonight. Really, I think you have a great show planned for us tonight because this is open conversation night. We have co-hosts Ben Wright, Glenn Flickinger, and Brad Washabaugh here in the room with us. And we do things a little different during open conversation. We don't have a specific guest tonight. It's about anybody contributing what they'd like, asking questions, talking, chatting. I'm here to run the mics, but everybody's mic is open. So basically you can unmute if you would like. If things get too loud, I'll mute everybody so that we can just get back on the same page. But really, I want people contributing. We're all sitting around, having a drink, enjoying ourselves. We have some great programs lined up throughout the month of February. I'll get to those a little bit later.
There's my drink, Sean. It's diet ginger ale, unfortunately. It's not what I would have preferred, but
I think that's an older men's drink. That's a mature drink. Give me straight Canada Dry.
Yeah, that word Canada all of a sudden made me feel a little colder than what I need to be.
Well, this is in honor of Scott Masters.
I see.
Love me a good ginger ale.
Is there any truth to the Groundhog at Punxsutawney being part Canadian?
I have not heard about him being part Canadian, but my daughter just learned about the Groundhog the other day, and we had to look up which way is which. If he sees the shadow, 6 more weeks. If he doesn't, early spring. But we looked up because I had to tell her that this is not a scientifically proven thing, and we found out that the Groundhog since 2 centuries ago has only been right about 33% of the time.
Yeah, but he's so cute. I mean,
I read the science behind the groundhog today. And the reality is they do poke their head out of the ground at about this time of the year, but they're actually looking for mates.
Then there's no credence to them finding and seeing their shadow here then. He did see a shadow, by the way, so 6 more weeks of winter. And then for those of you here in Pittsburgh, we're still digging out. For those of you a little south of us, I hear that you got some snow as well. Scott, I see in the chat you said we have Wyerton. Is that how you pronounce that? You can unmute, Scott.
Yep, Wyerton's a little town in northern Ontario. It's about 4 hours north of Toronto, and they have a groundhog called Wyerton Willie who predicted the opposite of Punxsutawney Phil, which makes no sense since he's so much further north. But whatever.
Hey, Sean, while we're on the subject of cold weather, has anybody in the audience ever set foot in the Arctic, North Pole, South Pole? I'm not going to use the word Greenland because, who knows. But has anybody served has stopped off or stepped foot on those Arctic circles, Antarctica? Anybody in the audience?
No one?
Been to Chile many times.
It wasn't exactly me, but my grandfather served Northern Alaska security force with the 75th Rangers before he was assigned to the 75th.
Thank you, Chase.
Well, this is Nancy Smoyer. I live in Fairbanks, and I have driven up past the Arctic Circle, but I wasn't stationed there or anything.
Is it true, Nancy, that there's certain times a year where you only get just sort of twilight, like barely any sun?
Yeah, that would be now.
Now?
No, well, that's not true. We have sun, but we have limited daylight. And farther north, yeah, I think the sun goes down and they never see it again for a month or two or something. I'm not an expert.
This is Bob. I've been up to Thule many times. It's an interesting flight. Uh, Coming out of McGuire Air Force Base, you fly up, you take off at night, well, let's put it early morning. And as you climb out, the sun rises in the east. And as you go further north and you get closer to Thule, and this is in say January or December, late December. As you approach Thule, the sun sets in the east because you're flying away from it. Now you're on the ground for several hours and you take off and you head on south and the sun rises in the west. And as you get down toward Montreal or thereabouts, and then you watch the sun set in the west. It's a strange day.
Well, Bob, you have a navigation background. How do you navigate all those conflicting sunsets, sunrises, and whatnot? And magnetic is a little different up there, isn't it?
Yes, you get further north and in today I noticed in the Veterans Breakfast Club entry, I've forgotten what you call it. There was a article there on Todd put in there about Greenland, and there is a great map there that is really made me sit up and take notice. As a matter of fact, I went so far as to I'm going to send this to Todd. It shows a polar projection where practically all of us, all our lives, we've looked at maps that are Mercator projections, where the Arctic is all distorted. And when I saw that map in that recent Breakfast Club, I thought, wow, the public should see this, and you'd be able to that's it, yeah. And it gives you an entirely new perspective on why Greenland is important. But looking at that, you'll see that the North Pole sits right about at the point there.
Right.
And so the question was asked, well, how do you navigate up there? Well, given that point where that arrow is, which way is south?
Yeah.
Every way.
Every way. So what we would do in the Air Force and what navigators do up there is they have an overlay. It's called grid, and they run a line up the meridian, the prime meridian out of Greenwich, England, and then they make a box pattern, and you convert and you fly grid. You do not fly magnetic up in that region, and that's how you get around.
Up here in the Arctic, this isn't land-based like Antarctica. It's all ocean.
That's water, yes.
How is it that
Ice.
way? Up there, yeah, ice. You're still able to like walk on it, or is it?
Oh yeah. Well, I don't know. I've never walked on it, but
you can see it.
But oh yes, indeed, yeah.
There's famous pictures, famous videos, famous documentaries of U.S. submarines going under the ice to the North Pole. I think the first one was the Nautilus in the 50s.
Yeah.
And I think what they've shown over the years is that the ice is not nearly as stable or as thick for as long during the winter as it used to be. Right.
Glenn is our resident World War II historian expert here. Glenn, was there fighting in the Arctic?
So, strictly speaking, north of the Arctic Circle, no. But awful close. Not this Thursday, but next Thursday, we're going to do a program on the Aleutian Island battles, Attu and Kiska, which are south of the Arctic Circle, but pretty darn cold, pretty darn miserable. And certainly then on the Atlantic side, there was an awful lot of convoys, that the famous Mermass convoys that went up north around the northern tip of what's that? Scandinavia, Norway, Sweden, and around to Murmansk. And I don't think they crossed the Arctic Circle, but it was pretty darn close.
Mhm.
Oh, there's pictures of those supply ships, covered in inches, if not feet, of ice at times. Dangerous for the ships themselves in terms of their ability to float. So that's, I think, as far north as the war went.
Yeah, I saw a
A lot of
documentary.
merchant Marines went into Murmansk. I was glad to see Bob Van Bargen talk about that polar projection map. Bob, when we went to Vietnam in 2018, we flew from Houston to Taipei, and so why are we flying over Alaska? And so I pulled up a polar projection on my phone with a photo and said, draw a straight line, and and figure out where's the shortest route.
Greg Yost put here in the chat, sorry, both Allies and Germans set up small weather stations in northern Greenland. Germans did get set up and operational, but didn't last too long. Thanks, Greg.
Yeah, it's another one approach that I've been in Greenland is Sunderstrom. And that one was interesting. You fly down into the fjord and then land on basically at water level and then go straight up the hill. And come back out the same way.
Thanks
And Ben, as I said here, my Air Force training said never walk through the prop arcs. And for months now, every time I see you sitting in front of that airplane with the props going, it really shakes me up.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ben, you need to look behind you every once in a while. You got to see when 30's coming right at you.
That's right. Those props are going to hit you.
Yes.
Do we have anybody new on the program tonight? Anybody who we don't recognize that hasn't been on before?
I see an admin. Welcome. And any other hands raised? Sherry? Hi, welcome. I'm just going to ask you to unmute. Is it Sherry? Am I pronouncing that right?
Yes, Sherry Blanton. I'm here supporting Bob Means, one of our other guests on the call today.
Bob, are you admin?
I'm over here. I don't know. Can you see me over here?
We can see you, Bob. Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. Thanks for joining us. I know I talked with you a bit earlier today, Bob. You came to us through Michael Archer.
Right.
And I believe you have a documentary you're working on.
I do. It's a documentary. It's addressing a very sad subject, and one none of us really want to talk about, but it's addressing veteran suicides. And at the moment, we have so far, the latest is between 17 and 22 veterans committing suicide every year. And I've decided to, the reason I'm making this documentary is because when I came, I'm a Vietnam vet. I was in the Marines. I was in Vietnam 67, 68, went through Tet Offensive. And when I came back to the States, after a number of years, one day things started happening to me, and I was in the shower and I had a total nervous breakdown. And I knew right away what it was from. It was from the war. And it took me about, I was sick for at least 3 years. And then when I was into it about a year and a half, I couldn't talk to anybody about it. That was before the whole PTSD thing. And a friend of mine came down from Alaska. He was a vet, and I started telling him what I was going through. And he said, yeah, I know. He said, I went through it too. He said, it took me 3 years to get over it. Well, in the midst of it, it was so miserable that, suicide was a real viable option. So I absolutely understand what these people go through and why they would consider such a thing. And so, but when my friend talked to me, he said it took him 3 years to get over it. I realized all of a sudden that I wasn't going to be like this the rest of my life. And I started reading all kinds of books. I never went to a psychiatrist or a doctor, but I started reading books about nervous breakdown, and all of my symptoms were correct. And then I realized it was from the war. And what happened to me was in this process of getting my feet back on the ground, I realized that war is so much bigger than yourself that you're lost when you come home. And I realized I had to get involved in something bigger than myself. And I had a friend in Guatemala that was building an orphanage, and he asked, I'm a builder by trade, and he asked me to come down and help him build the orphanage. And so that gave me an outlet, something bigger than myself that I could put my life to. And I went down and built the orphanage for him. Did a number of trips down there, organized work teams. And then what happened, that started a 30-year career, I guess you could say, in international disaster relief. And so I've been on every international disaster you can think of. I became the shelter consultant with World Relief International. And they would send me in after a disaster to set up temporary shelter programs for people who lost their homes. Wow. And then I had the opportunity, I went back to Vietnam, 1988, and with a team. And because we were building orphanages, we asked the Vietnamese if we could build orphanages, and they gave us polio clinic number 5 in Saigon, Ho Chi Minh City, however you want to say it. And we completed that project plus 2 other orphanages. And then I was invited by Dr. Waugh, who happened to be the head of the VC medical department during the war. She was Dr. Waugh. She had the Pediatric Research Center, and she asked us to build maternity, me and my wife, who is a British nurse and midwife, if we would build maternity clinics in the rural areas. So we went out to a little village called Phu Ngoc in Dinh Quan province, right on the Dong Nai River, and we built a clinic there. And then after that, I kept on doing my work. And so what we're trying to do with this documentary is to give people alternatives, let people know that these guys that are possibly considering doing something horrible to themselves, give them an alternative thought, because after you've been in the military, you were trained to be servants, to serve. And the only real outlet that I could see, if you're going through some crisis, is to consider that service, element in your life. And it's very fulfilling, life-changing, and gives you a purpose. And Sherry and I have been working on this documentary for the last year. She's my assistant, and we met in Southcom. I got picked up by Southcom as NGO SME for their Latin American PKO operations, which means when the military gets involved in a disaster relief, they have to correlate their movements with the NGOs. And so I did that for 6 years, and that's where me and Sherry met. And then when I started this project, she offered to help. I don't want to take a whole lot of time, but that's where we're going. And you can look at what we've done. It was Michael Archer that turned me on to the Veterans Breakfast Club. And I talked to, I had her name on anyway, I sent my book to her, and she was gonna, and so me and Mike have been very dear friends over the years, and he's very supportive of the project. You can see it. You can see what we've done so far at mysoultokeepllc.com. There's a teaser in there, a 4-minute teaser on the documentary, and there's a write-up on it, and at the very bottom, Channel 6 came out and did a story, and I was involved in that story, and we won an Emmy Award. So we know there's an audience for this type of a documentary, and we really want to reach out to these veterans that are struggling.
Thank you, Bob. Any questions from anyone? Glenn, go ahead.
Bob, what was the suicide rate that you quoted first thing when you started to talk?
The stats are right now 17 to 22 a day.
Day.
A
Okay.
day.
Because I thought at the beginning you said a year, but
I might have. I'm getting old, you see. But I might have said a year, but it is a day. And it was when I heard that, I mean, I've heard people, I mean, a number of my friends have committed suicide from Vietnam that I know. And so when I heard 22 a day, I said, man, I got to do something about this.
And do we have
When you say 20, when you say 22 a day, how does that break down among the theaters these people were in? Are we talking about Vietnam vets, Gulf War vets? Do you have any breakdown on
I don't know the break. I wish I did. I know that a good friend of Michael Archer and his book Top Miller, he was the corpsman with Mike, and he just committed suicide last year, and he was in caisson with Mike, and he's very prominent in Mike's books. Patch of Ground, and and he went back to Vietnam looking for Tom Mahoney, his friend. And Top Miller did, and he actually became a Buddhist. He married a Vietnamese. He lived half his life back in Vietnam. He was a professor at, I think, the University of Tennessee, and he committed suicide last year. And I know a number of other people, Vietnam vets that I met, committed suicide. And then I'm working with 3 other vets in this documentary, Billy Terrell, Ben King, and Ryan Donahoe. Ryan she worked with the Lioness program in Afghanistan. She was a Marine. They call it FET, Female Engagement Teams.
We've talked about them on our programs, yes.
Yeah, so she was one of those, and she's lost a number of friends. So it's an ongoing thing. It's mind-blowing. It's hard to accept, but I have to believe that it's true, and I just couldn't sit there knowing what I went through and how we worked through it, that I couldn't at least try and share it to save some lives.
When Bob was talking, Bob, what I was thinking about is we had a guest on to try to define PTSD or PTS growth, and he really talked about finding a purpose. And that's really what I thought about as you talked about what you're doing with the building, is finding a purpose. And that finding purpose seems to work a lot better than drugs for some people that are really struggling with this.
Well, I think you're right. The latest thing is taking mushrooms, to cure your PTSD. Yeah. But I'm one, I still got it. I call it rage. Like, you go through Marine Corps boot camp and training, they take your head off and stuff you full of rage. And that rage stays with you your whole life. And what I had to do, I'm not a clinical psychiatrist or psychologist. I use my own words. So my words would be rage. I mean, I feel it today, leftover from the war and from Marine Corps training. And what I realized I had to do was redirect my rage. I could do 2 things. I could use that rage to destroy myself, or use that rage to direct it in a positive manner. And, so that I think you're absolutely right, that positive thinking, and because, once you go through a war, I mean, what else is there, to be honest with you? I mean, what in your life, what is going to match that in your life, no matter what you do?
It's incredible how much anger is a motivator. Al Smith asked, we'll get you right in a second, Dave. Al, unless you're going to ask the same question. Bob, did you seek help from the VA?
I never did at the time, because back then, none of this was, I didn't know any of this was available. And what happened was, I'm going through this crisis, and I noticed there was this house, and it was in Eureka, California, and there was this house that said the Vet Center. And I went into the Vet Center because I couldn't work because of a broken neck I had surfing in Hawaii. And I was looking for a new career. I thought, well, maybe my GI Bill. I mean, I never even considered going to the VA. I had no concept of it. And so when I walked in there, I met this guy, Dan Krejci. To be honest with you, it's tragic. He committed suicide, and he was my counselor at the Vet Center. And anyway, when he was talking to me, he says, "We ever been in here?" And I said, "No." And he gave me a pamphlet and he said, "Well, go home and read this. And then when you get back, when you read it, come on back, we'll talk about it." Well, I opened that book and I started reading. I thought somebody wrote a book about me, you know, and I had no idea. I had no idea that this, you know, we came back from Vietnam. All we wanted to do is catch up and party, you know, back then, because when we went to Vietnam, there was no miniskirts, no long hair, no drugs. And we came back, there was a whole nother world. And wow, we go, wow, what happened here? We wanted to catch up. Well, that was basically my goal in life. But then I had this crisis and that kind of put an end to that. So
Dave Seaver.
So he mentioned the mushrooms. Right now, there is a documentary on Netflix called "In Waves and War," and it follows some Navy SEALs from the War on Terror who actually went to Mexico to do this treatment. So, you know, they go down there, they do use psychedelics, and these guys are claiming it does wondrous things for them. And now actually some of the VAs here are starting to use that. I have a friend who lives in Tucson, Arizona, who is an Air Force veteran and recently did that and was saying it was just phenomenal treatment for him. But I know that Stanford University is doing some research on that as well, and some of the VAs are starting to use that as a treatment method for PTSD. So that is out there. That is a thing, and there is research on it that's starting to validate that as a treatment method. And for Glenn, I just wanted to say, come on over because I've got a mixer for your.
Got the good stuff there, David.
Yeah, it's.
Where do you live again?
What's that? Yeah, I got that when I retired, and I haven't touched it yet, but because I don't drink very often. But yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there because that had gotten mentioned. And you know, the other thing, you know, you talk about coming home is, you know, I put in the chat that the military is great at teaching us to do war and go to war, but they're horrible at teaching us how to come home. You know, when I came home from my first deployment, I got on an airplane. We landed in Germany. We got back on the airplane. We landed in Baltimore. For some silly reason, they had us stay overnight. And the next day I was home. When I came home from Afghanistan, I sat around Manas, Kyrgyzstan, bored down to my socks for 5 days, got on an airplane, and I was home. Same thing when I came home from Qatar. I got on an airplane. We landed in, you know, Germany, then Baltimore, and I actually got a car and drove home because that was quicker than the flight they were going to put me on to get home. So they really don't do, I mean, even now, this was 2021 no, actually I came home in early 22 from my last deployment, and it's like, okay, get on the airplane, bye, see you, go home. And there was no
decompression, no
decompression.
interview, no
exactly.
attempt to. Brad, you know of what is the program? TARPs?
TAPS?
TAPS is what you would go through normally about a year prior to your departure from the military, that they can sort of give you pointers or something, right?
Yeah. I was supposed to go through that when I got home from Qatar the last time. So I go out to the base out here, and it's early January. So it's January 22, and everybody's on vacation. The building's all locked up. And 9 months later, I get this email like, hey, you got to do all these online stuff right now. That was TAPS. Woo.
So adding a bunch of stress to an already stressful situation. Get it done quick. Jim Roberts.
Just a couple things. Talking about coming home, I left in late November, December of 71. Coming back, we had a 1-hour class at Saigon through MACV on becoming a civilian. We had pretty much the same thing when we got to California. And what I found leaving the service is the last thing we did when we were signing out was we were going to get paid whatever money they owed us for unused leave and things like this. When we walked up to the, you were saying that at that time in December, I was wearing khakis because that's what I had in Vietnam. And that'll go off in a minute. And walked up to the payroll station, and they counted out my money and they said, if you give me your ID card, you can have your money. And you handed in your ID card. Well, that time you didn't have a driver's license, you didn't have a passport. The only piece of ID you had was a driver's license. You handed it in and they handed you your money. And at that point, I had this very lost feeling that I had no connection with anyone. And what I found out, the best word I have for it's loneliness. I was on a 5-man team in a small village, and you would have never gotten any of us together in any kind of social situation because we were just 5 totally different people. But we were a team. And I have never, ever in the 50-some years since then have had that kind of teamwork experience. Working with teams here and whatever jobs I've had, it was never the kind of team you had. And you made the statement, once you've been to war, what is there? That loss of that teamwork was just an incredible amount of loneliness. And it even when I got back and was with my wife and things, and we're getting things, it still felt lonely because you weren't with a real team, a team whose lives depended on each other's activities. So.
Good point, Jim. Sue, I know you've talked with countless veterans, and you just put in the chat that few people pay attention during TAPS because the timing is bad. You just want to get out. David, you could probably also speak to that. But Sue, I wanted to speak to your experience talking with people about their experience with TAPS.
Yeah, so that's a very common thing that I hear is, TAPS is great, and they talk about how can we make it better, and the pretty common feeling is don't have us do that while we're sitting to wait to go home and be with family, and we're not ready to process those kind of things. But the programming is not bad, it's just the timing is bad, and it's not the fault of somebody coming out, it's just bad timing. And so the support that comes later, and honestly, I say this when I'm not
mute and boot. Remove. Got him.
Are we going to continue?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can continue.
He's gone.
He's gone.
Sorry about that, everybody.
Sorry about it, everybody.
Can't do anything about it.
That's our one Zoom bomber we let in per year. Joking. No, you get Zoom bombed every once in a while. We move on. Anyway.
Yeah. But I was just going to say, I say this, when I'm not sitting on Veterans Breakfast Club, this is hugely helpful for so many people, and you can't measure the effect of something like this. The Warrior hockey team that's all combat veterans, disabled combat veterans, just because it gives them that sense of camaraderie, some of those kind of things just are the grassroots kind of things. And, I have heard wonderful things, crazy as it sounds, about the mushrooms, and, listen to podcasts and, some things like that. But it's that sense of connection and purpose. And, Bob, when you talk about purpose, I mean, that's huge. And that comes in all sorts of different ways. But yeah, I don't know. I sort of got disrupted.
No problem.
Lost my train of thought a little bit.
That's all right. I was in the Marines, so I can hack it.
Yeah. Well, I taught 6th grade, so isn't like it didn't happen there too.
Kind of the same mentality. I asked Scott Masters to unmute. Scott, you had a great question there in the chat. Can you go ahead and ask it?
Yeah, and I see Ben gave a response, but I was curious if the American military offers a decompression program, like a retreat of some kind for soldiers returning from conflict zones. And I asked that because Canada does offer that, and I know it's a totally different scale and a totally different situation, but for Canadian soldiers returning from Kandahar, from Afghanistan, they spend about a week or so at a seaside resort in Cyprus before they come to Canada. And it's not just vacation, there's mental health programs and everything. I was just wondering if there was an equivalent.
The New Jersey National Guard has taken the Bordentown Armory and has removed all military vestiges of in that armory, and it is dedicated to people who are struggling with suicide and mental illness, and it's for people serving in the Guard, active duty reserves. It's all, and it's social workers, psychiatrists. They are there. People can go in, and it is all confidential. Nothing gets back to, if you're still serving, nothing gets back to your commander, or would affect future promotions or anything like that. They really do a wonderful job over there.
Can I add a little something? I'll tell you, since I've been involved. Me and Sherry might have something to say, but before I say, we've come in contact with everybody trying to make this document. We've reached out to everybody that we know of. And there are literally I can almost say hundreds of programs for veterans. You know, that you can, there's fly fishing, there's surfing, there's this one group takes these guys out surfing. One guy had both his legs blown off and one arm blown off, and they put a paddle on him, and they got him out there surfing, taking off on his stumps, surfing these waves. I mean, there's program after program. And the more I look at, I'm amazed when I look at all these different programs, and they all sound good, and they probably are good. I'm sure they are. But with all the programs that you have, there's still 17 to 22 veterans a day killing themselves, you know? And I understand it, because when you're going through this mental torment that you go through, you're just lost in it. You know, it's hard to even talk to anybody about it. You know, your coping skills have been totally destroyed. You know, I couldn't even get off the couch to go to the bathroom. You know, it was too big of a trauma. And so it lasted me 11. And then I learned, if somebody used the word anger, and when I was about through that, I asked this, I had a broken neck, and I asked my neurologist, I said, what causes a nervous breakdown? And he said, well, the main cause for a nervous breakdown is anger. Well, that fit right in. You know, if you don't control it. And the other thing I realized I had to do was, you have to realize you got it. You know, you got it. I had this rage. I didn't know I had this rage, but now I know I do. And then once I know I have the rage, I know that I can direct it in one way or the other. And so you change. It's coming to grips with yourself and with the reality of what you've been through, you know, and who you are and your symptoms. Going back to mushrooms, I don't blame anybody for doing mushrooms. If mushrooms can help them, God bless them, you know. But, you know, there's a lot of people that aren't going to take mushrooms. There's still, with all the mushrooms hanging out there, there's still 22 veterans a day killing themselves. So
we'll go to Dave, and we'll go to Rob, and then we'll move on. David, go ahead.
So there is a program out there that the military does pre and post deployment called Yellow Ribbon. So, you know, you can go by yourself, you can take your spouse, you can take your family. I remember going to one pre-deployment at Nemacolin. So it was kind of fun stuff for the kids to do while, you know, mom and dad learned how to communicate and, you know, do some other things. You know, if the spouse who's deploying is the banker, then how does the spouse stay at home become the banker, et cetera, et cetera. But this is kind of funny, but it's not. One thing I remember, because it was at Nemacolin, it was lots of fun. And my youngest daughter said, Daddy, when can we go do that thing at Nemacolin again? And I just said, when do you want me to deploy again? And she said, never mind. But they do those, you know, pre-deployment, post-deployment. They do them at, you know, various places all over the country. So that's just another resource that's out there that they offer you, you know, once you're back home.
Right.
Bob Oles, I unmuted you because you put something in the chat. I thought you might be able to speak to it.
Yes. Hi, good evening, everyone. I had mentioned in the chat, I was medically evacuated from Iraq in April 2005. So it was fairly early in the experience. And I was evacuated with a non-battle injury. I was flown out of the 86th Combat Support Hospital in Baghdad, which was nicknamed Baghdad ER. I think they actually did a documentary about it on HBO. From Baghdad to Balad, and then flew from Balad Air Base in Iraq to Germany, and Germany back to the States. When I arrived at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, I was considered a litter case, so I wasn't able to walk. They loaded me on the ambulance, and I was met by a female civilian nurse who didn't mention anything about, well, welcome back, to the States, this, that. The only thing she was interested in was telling me that, you're subject to an Article 15 if you don't take all of your prescribed medications with you. And that was a real gut punch to me. And that was basically probably one of the low points in my military experience.
And that was when you were leaving?
That was when I arrived at Fort Bragg, early April 2005. And the other thing is that at Fort Bragg, it's the Womack Army Hospital. And in early 2005, I don't think the military, or at least at Fort Bragg, they were prepared for the amount of returnees, especially those that had battle injuries, non-battle injuries. They were completely inundated and unprepared for how to treat the veterans. It was very common, especially on the weekends, to see soldiers just laid out on the grass with bottles of beer all over the grass. It was just a complete, crap show, to be honest with you.
Man. Unless there are any other people who'd like to add anything here. Bob Means, I want to thank you. Sherry, I want to thank you both for joining us. And please join us again. Bob, may I ask where you're from?
Well, right now I'm living in Urbana, Virginia. It's about halfway between DC and Norfolk, right on the Rappahannock River. There's 650 of us, established 1680, and it hasn't gone too much further than that.
Mm-hmm. And okay, Chase, I'll have you unmute. And Sherry, yes. Oh yeah, I asked you to unmute. Sherry, where are you joining us from?
San Antonio, Texas.
Excellent. Well, please continue to join us. We have lots of great programs coming up. I'll get to those in a few minutes. Just to talk about what we're having coming up while we're here in the cold winter months in Pittsburgh and not doing our in-person breakfast. We got some great stuff lined up in the coming weeks. So I hope to see you guys back. Chase, you raised your hand.
Yeah. I recently my uncle found my grandfather's journal from his time in the Navy. And so I have all his records. I know that he has 10 campaign stars on his Pacific Liberation Medal. But I didn't realize just the amount of battles that he was in. I have the Roll of Honor right here. This was pretty much, in my opinion.
Chase, if you're going to show it to us, you might want to start your camera.
Oh, no, I just posted it in the chat.
Oh, great. Okay, thank you.
Got it. But yeah, so he was a boatswain's mate, second class on a tin can destroyer. First one in the South China Sea, first one to Tokyo Harbor. 10 campaign stars on his Pacific Medal, 2 on his Philippine Liberation, and then the American Defense and the World War II victory.
That's a lot. Seems like a lot. Does it seem like a lot to everybody else? To me, civilian, I look at this and I think, wow, this is okay. People are shaking their head.
Chase,
that's a lot.
I was looking at what you have in the chat here. This is Glenn speaking. And that's incredibly impressive. So repeat again. This is your grandfather.
Yeah.
Served on a destroyer. Do you know the name of the destroyer?
USS Cogswell.
Cogswell. Okay.
I have the journal. He wrote. I have nearly every single. I have the entire time that he was on this vessel from 1943 to the Pearl Harbor to the surrender of Tokyo in 1945. I've got I even have a commendation for the ship from the Admiral.
What I find curious about this, Glenn, and it just popped in my head, is a lot of people talk about we know people that have made it from D-Day all the way through the war.
Yeah.
Like Warren Goss in our network. Warren, Omaha Beach went all the way through to the end of the war. But a lot of people talk about you made it all the way through the European theater. But how many guys, the percentage of guys who made it through the entire Pacific theater?
Yeah, again, just like in Europe, relatively few. The numbers in the Pacific theater, just like the numbers in the European theater. So in the European theater, 75%, I'm just guessing at that, maybe 80% of the veterans that served from June 6 on. Okay. The numbers were just not that significant in the Mediterranean, Sicily, and Italy. Okay. And the same in the Pacific, very similar. 75% of the Navy, Marines, all that served from the battle of the takeover of Saipan and Guam in June of 44 onwards, which also correlates to the casualty rates, by the way. The casualty rates after June of 44 in both theaters just skyrocketed because of the number of battles which took place in the campaigns and so forth. But back to Chase. Chase, you said you have his some sort of write-up about him?
Entire journal comprised from him and two of his best friends on the ship. And I have a particularly interesting section if I can read it.
Yeah, how long and is it
It's January, it's pretty short. It's just January 11th through the 15th, but mostly January 12th is the interesting one.
okay?
January 12th, 1944, made strikes on the east coast of Indochina. Little air resistance was encountered, but large amounts of shipping were either severely damaged or sunk by our forces. Main Jap bases hit were Cam Ranh Bay, Saigon, Gungao, and other nearby bases. Summary of our first airstrike. Sunk 1 cargo, 1 destroyer, 8 medium cargos. Strafed fires started on the beach at Cam Ranh Bay. First convoy attacked, 5 destroyers sunk, 1 destroyer exploded when beached. 3 destroyers remaining dead in water, 1 destroyer still circling. Second convoy attacked, 2 large oilers sunk, 4 or 5 destroyers sunk. Third convoy, 1 heavy cruiser, 1 light cruiser, 6 cargo transports heavily laden, 4 destroyers. Due to bad weather, was unable to attack fourth convoy. 3 tankers sunk, 2 left burning, 12 ships damaged. All but 3 escorts were strafed heavily. 20 targets still left behind for strike. Note, heard Tokyo rose again last night, and she said, we got into the China Sea all right, but that we would never get out.
It was a total crap show.
Yeah.
And then she
Jace,
shot down a Japanese colonel. And January 15th, sent airstrikes against Hong Kong. 1 DN was shot down, 1 transport, 2 torpedo bombers. We were ordered by the task group commander to pick up 3 Jap bodies that were in the water to see if they had any information on them. The first one was half eaten up by either sharks or barracuda. He had about $3,000 in invasion money and a belt around his stomach. The second one wasn't so bad, except most of his head was gone. He had a Jap flag and a bag around his neck and photos of his family and other information. Markings from his uniform showed that he was an officer in the army, probably off from one of the transports which we sunk. The third one was too far gone to be picked up.
Hey, Chase, if I put my email in the chat, if you could email me and you and I could arrange a time to speak, I'd love to speak to you and dig into your grandfather's war record and all that information you have. If you have it in some form that you could share with us, I'd love to see it. And perhaps,
oh yeah, I have his journals, and then I have photos of his discharge records, his temporary naval ID from when he went ashore on San Francisco during the Victory Tour.
please, it's fascinating. I'd love to know more about it. And if you would contact me, Glenn at veteransbreakfastclub.org, that's pretty easy. I probably by mistake put no, I did put org. We could find a time to chat and follow up on this discussion. Love to do it. That's a fascinating war record.
Yeah.
Brad, were you going to ask a question?
Yeah, Chase, that's very interesting. I was wondering, do you have any letters, anything that gives more of a personal story, what your grandfather was thinking during this time? It sounds like it's more of a battle record, which is very interesting, of actions. But do you have anything that gives a more human side to what he was thinking, what he was fearing, what he was enjoying, a little more insight into the man behind the action?
Besides a couple opinions on Thanksgiving, on Tokyo Rose, and how they went ashore for Christmas on one island that I can't remember, he didn't really preserve that type of stuff. He kind of went home and went on with his civilian life.
Yeah. That's as Glenn said, we're trying to learn more from the relatives of veterans now, because a lot of the stories have been passed down in one way or another, and some are yet to be discovered in the attic or through other means. And we want to encourage followers of the Veterans Breakfast Club to let us know what they know about their relatives that have a story to tell. And we're happy to learn and get that story out too. We're looking for a way to do that. So that's
By the
very
way, I found the island's name. It was Mogmog Island.
Great.
Mogmog was the recreational island, I think, in the Ulithi Atoll. That
Yeah,
makes
he pointed out that they had the usual Christmas dinner on Mogmog Island, played some baseball along the beach.
Ulithi Atoll was a huge, huge place. And the Navy took one of the islands, I believe that's the one, Mogmog, and turned it into an island-wide recreational area for seamen, not for officers, just for seamen. Really fascinating place, actually.
I have some photos of him and his crew that I'm just going to post in the general chat.
Okay, hold on. I'm looking up Mogmog. There's actually a movie called Marooned on Mogmog. This is a picture of Mogmog here.
Did I get that right? Is that
I'm assuming so.
In the Ulithi Atoll?
Yeah. I looked up Mogmog Ulithi Atoll.
Yeah, that's it.
There you go. 1 second here. Let me get back to our view here. Let me go ahead and take a quick station break for everybody, just so you know what we have coming up. And then Barb, we'll get to you right after that. But first, I want to share this. If you all hadn't heard, Grady DeMond Wilson, Sanford and Sons, passed away this past weekend. His obit was put into the New York Times, and they neglected to share his Vietnam service. He was in the U.S. Army, and he was in, I believe it was the 4th Infantry. Yes, 4th Infantry Division in Vietnam, and he was actually wounded there in Vietnam. But we wanted to share that news of his passing, because I'm sure a lot of you remember Sanford and Sons. Glenn, did you watch it? Brad?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. He was always at odds with his father. I mean, it was every show, it was just frustration and whatnot, but it was funny. It was funny. Fox did a great job too. So
they ran a junkyard.
Yeah, Sanford and Son junkyard, and the joke was, where did you get that piece of junk from Sanford and Son? When the show was popular, that was a thing going around. Hey, Sean, I wanted to open it up, if we can, to some humor in uniform, maybe some stories from our audience about an event that happened while they served that they'd like to share that was rather humorous or funny.
Please, let's do that. Let me tell everybody about our VBC magazine. Everybody think and get ready. And also raise your hand. Because we had a Zoom bobber, I turned off the unmute function. So just raise your hand and I'll unmute you. But we want to let you know that this is the next VBC magazine, The War Within a War. We're going to have a great program lined up coming up soon this month. Also to honor Black History Month with this gentleman. We'll be talking with him about his service, Will Haygood. Brad and Daria and I will be co-hosting that program. But also look for this magazine in your mailbox in the coming weeks. It is a free magazine. It is what we print out quarterly. If you don't get it, it's because we don't have your address. So please send that to me and we'll make sure that you get a copy. If you'd like multiple copies, for anybody here, if you'd like multiple copies and like to hand it out in your community, to your friends, to your family, please let us know. We're happy to send you a box or 10 or 15 or whatever you like. Put them at your barber or wherever, because it's the best way we have to get out the word about VBC and what we do. Speaking about what we do, this coming Thursday, 80th anniversary of the Nuremberg trials. Glenn, you have this coming up Thursday.
Yeah, really looking forward to this. The guest is really a distinguished guest, John Q. Barrett, professor at law at St. John's University, if I have that right, in Queens, New York. One of the most knowledgeable, authoritative people you could find on the Nuremberg trials, and specifically Robert Jackson, who was pictured there, right there, who was the chief U.S. prosecutor and really the man that developed the structure of the trials. And without him, they may not have been the trials. So this is just on the first trial, the big guy with the big names, Goring, Hess, etc. So yeah, should be a really good program.
That'll be Monday night. And as we mentioned, Will Haygood, he'll be on February 9th. That'll be Monday night. World War II and the Aleutians. You mentioned this earlier in the program. That'll be on February 12th. And then actually Don Nemchek's going to be hosting a program. This is going to be a night about music of the Vietnam War with Doug Bradley, his recent book, Tracks of Our Years. Don has read the book. Don is an expert himself on the music of the Vietnam War era. So I'm kind of excited to sit down with two guys who kind of geek out about the music from that time. I did a couple podcasts about it years ago for BBC and just loved listening to Don talk about it. He's very passionate about it. Doug, obviously, with his book, very passionate about it. It'll be an interesting evening. So that'll be what's coming up in the coming weeks. Brad, back to your question. Would love to hear some funny stories. Barb, we will get to you in a bit. But if you'd like to raise your hand and answer Brad's question, we'd love to hear from you.
I can
Okay,
tell you a
John.
9/11 story.
Yeah, I could start off with my own humorous story to kind of get the ball rolling.
There you go.
I think if you're in the Marine, if you're in the military like I was 29 years, you have periods of sheer joy, sheer fear, sheer, your career's going to be over for something you said or did. That happens many times. Well, as a young lieutenant, I was assigned to recruiting duty in Albany, New York. And I went straight from being a platoon commander in Okinawa right to recruiting duty. So I was a little rough around the edges, is hard to imagine. But and my boss was a Major Chase. He was a Silver Star recipient, Purple Heart, 3 Purple Hearts. The medals went from all the way up over the top almost. So he was somebody that could just clear his throat and strike the fear of God in you, with a little look. And, our recruiting duty is tough enough. And my job was the operations officer. So I divided up the quota, managed it and whatnot. And there was a story, this is probably 1978 or 9. There was a story that hit the Associated Press about the recruits at Great Lakes booing the national anthem. They were in the theater and it just came out, they were booing it for whatever reason. And it's just kind of a small story, but it was the end of the month, really busy. The phone rang, and I was the only officer in the station at the time. And the sergeant said, "We've got a reporter from the Albany newspaper wants to talk to somebody in charge." So I took the phone, and real busy. I wasn't really thinking. And he said, "I have to ask you a question about this booing the national anthem. What is your reaction to that, Lieutenant?" And I said, I'm not really qualified to speak about that. He says, "Oh, shucks, I know you're not qualified, but just off the record, can you tell me what you think about people booing the national anthem while they were going through recruit training?" And I said, "Well, they must be a bunch of communists, and it sounds to me like it's taking apple pie and shoving it in your mother's face." It was some remark that was so way far out there. And he said, "Oh, that's funny, Lieutenant. Well, thank you so much," and click. And it was about a couple hours later, I was sitting at my desk and this guy came in with a camera and he took my picture. I saw a flash and he was out the door. And the next day, we got busy and went home. And the next day I went by where the newspapers were being sold, and I picked up a newspaper and I opened up the front page, and the second page, there was a picture of me at my desk looking up with a real mean look, and the quote of, "They must be communists, and it's like taking apple pie, shoving it in your mother's face." And my heart just kind of dropped because I was a lieutenant and I figured my career was over. I walked into the office and it was like you could hear a pin drop. Everybody turned and looked at me like I was walking dead. Like, "What did you do, Lieutenant?" That was, and I sat down at my desk and the senior staff NCO looked at me and just shook his head and said, "Lieutenant, you're going to have to tell a major." And I said, "Geez." Well, he just called a few minutes later and he said, well, how's it going, Lieutenant? What do we have going? How many enlisted? And I was just trying to get the words out. And he says, we have anything else to tell me, Lieutenant? And I said, well, there was this incident and what? And he was just like pulling it out of me. And finally he said, read me the article. So I had to read the article word for word to him, and it was like walking the gangplank, you know. And at the very end, he said, and this is why I respect him so much, Major Jerry Chase. He said, well, did you learn from it? And I said, yes, sir. And he never mentioned it again, you know, never mentioned it again. And but that wasn't the end of it. I think it was like a week later. The folks in the office were having a fun time with me because they were trying to alleviate the tension. And they kept giving me those yellow phone messages saying, Colonel Bear's calling for you. And I said, I don't know a Colonel Bear. And, well, you better call him, Lieutenant. And, you know, 2 or 3 more messages put on my desk, call Colonel Bear at this number, 202 area code is Washington, D.C. area code. So I figured, man, and now I'm in trouble at the Pentagon or something. Somehow they get whiff of that. And so I finally called the number, and it ended up being the answer line to the National Zoo. And it talked about the bear being the visiting. You can see bears, you can see tigers and whatnot. So, you know, I put down the phone, everybody got a great laugh. But it's, you know, it's funny how humor sometimes can alleviate a lot of tension and whatnot. But that was my one time where I thought my career was over after 2.5 years in the Marine Corps. So that's my story.
That's great, Brad. Dave.
Well, Bob Van Bargen started to say something there, so why don't you let him go?
Bob, I'll ask you to unmute. You were off the record, Brad. That shouldn't have been used against you.
I know. It's never believe anybody says off the record. That's what I learned.
There is no off the record.
Bait. That's bait, you know.
No, earlier we mentioned Thule, and this is a flight out of Pittsburgh in a C-124, and we stopped at Goose Bay, and so from Goose Bay we're heading up to Thule, and the pilot, some of you may or may not have known it, was Joe Weinshank, who was a rather colorful, shall I say, individual. Excellent pilot, but he stuttered, and so we approach Thule, and the approach control tells us that the field is below minimums. You have to go back to Goose. So we turn around, and we had an airplane was loaded with eggs. We had eggs that had come out of McGuire Air Force Base. So we head on back down toward Goose, and then they call us. Oh no, the field's open because they want the mail. And that's on the airplane. So we turn around, and well, this happened several times. You know, in and out and back and forth. It's below minimums. It's not below minimums. Finally, Joe said in his stuttering voice, he said, "You guys better get your act together, or this is going to be the biggest flying omelet you've ever seen."
Did you have a good laugh then at his expense a bit?
Oh, he was something else.
Yeah.
One time we were dropping troops in C-119s. We were dropping troops out of Pittsburgh, and we had a tracked vehicle. This pilot that we had, he could always maneuver a vehicle for us. Others would have to wait for the crew bus, and Tony Holowinski would always get us a vehicle. Well, this time all he could get was a tracked vehicle, and it had a bad clutch, and we parked on one side of the field at Pope, and so you had to go around the runway. So as you came down there was a road that came in at an angle. So he's sitting on the left, and I'm in the middle, and Joe Weinshank is on the right. So Tony says to Joe, he says, is the route clear? And he starts to engage the clutch, and Joe says, he said, nothing but a, he said, is it clear on the right? Joe says, there's nothing but a dog. And Tony lets the clutch up. Now, we're out in the boons, and we start across, and then he says, painted on a bus, at which point Tony, the clutch comes up, the thing tracks, and we went over the top, down the berm, and sat there at the bottom, the three of us laughing like hell, waiting for the bus to go by.
I want to mention, Dave, before we get to you, Ira Martin put here in the chat, for those of you who may not have seen it. When researching the 11th Marines in Korea, I often found references from other regiments seeing the artillery for a moment or in passing. One 5th Marine commented he spotted a whole battery firing a mission in only their underwear. I immediately called one of my surviving 11th Marines and asked if this was true. He said, absolutely not. I would have had my pistol belt on too. Dave Seaver.
Well, if you remember, during the Obama administration, there was the film from the firefight at one of the FOBs in Afghanistan, and there was the guy with his helmet, his flak jacket, and his I Love New York underwear and flip-flops on in the middle of a firefight. So, yeah. So earlier I mentioned, coming home from Afghanistan, we got to spend some quality or less than quality time at Manas, Kyrgyzstan, and there was... So, the first 24 hours, we're all just exhausted. So we all just slept. But after that, you're just sitting around. There's nothing to do. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner were the highlights of the day. So one day, just to literally kill time, I went and got my hair cut. So in that part of the world, a large percentage of the population are descendants of Genghis Khan because he was a very prolific individual. So they have this Asian appearance. And this gal that was cutting my hair, very beautiful, but very Asian appearance. So I asked her, and you can see I got pretty good eyebrows, if she would trim my eyebrows. And she said, you crows you eyes. So I crowed my eyes. And she took the head off the electric clippers and just went meow, meow. And my eyebrows were gone. Just like that. Boom. These babies gone. Poof. That cut into the tip.
Yeah.
Jim Roberts, I'll ask you to unmute.
This is kind of a Brad's alley. I was commissioned out of OCS in May, and my first assignment was as a training officer in EXO, the basic training company at Fort Campbell. 101st was deployed, and they'd turned the entire Fort Campbell into a basic training organization. During the last week of an 8-week training cycle, was the week that your company was basically serving the base. The people who had missed certain training elements made it up. Everyone else was doing things like mowing lawns and painting rocks white and whatever you had to do in the Army. And there was always the OD. And for some reason, I got tasked to be the OD for the entire week, which meant I basically lived, I'd go home in the morning, shower, put on a fresh uniform, and I would be with the troops. And my job was to inspect them, post them for guard duty, and do whatever else they wanted to do. And so every company provided their troops every day. And one of the things we had to do was raise and lower the flag. Well, the trainees do this. So you take them over in the Jeep with one of the sergeants. He shows them how to load the blank 105 howitzer shell into the cannon, pull the lanyard, fire the thing, show them how to raise the flag, lower it, how to fold it up correctly, and do all this. And so we do this just fine. Big boom. The 105 is pointed right at the general's quarters. A big boom in the evening. In the morning, it's an adapter with a shotgun shell in it. So the howitzer goes, boom. That's all you get. And so we're doing this, and everything blurs together because you're doing the same thing every day and you have no idea what it is. So we get up one morning, we take the group over, we're standing there, the blank adapters in, go into the headquarters building for the post, pick up the blank adapter, the NCO in charge puts the shotgun shell in it, hands it to me. We go out, give it to the trainee. And so we're waiting for the bugle to play. in the morning. Time comes, tick, 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 no bugle. And so look at the sergeant. The sergeant says, let's do it. So, poof, run the flag up the pole, take everything out, march the troops back. I take the black adapter, walk back into the company headquarters to the NCO in charge. And he looks at me and says, Lieutenant, it's Sunday. You don't do early morning reveille on an Army post on Sunday. And so we very quickly, the post NCO and I went out very quickly, lowered the flag with ceremony, folded it up, drove back to the Jeep. We came back at, I don't know, it was 9 o'clock or whatever it was, and did it again. I have no idea how that NCO accounted for the missing shotgun shell, the blank that we fired. But I'm just glad we didn't have a real 105 shell, because the general would have known about it right away.
What would have been the punishment?
Well, come on. I was a third class second lieutenant. I mean, I was behind every West Point graduate, every ROTC graduate. I had orders for Vietnam. What were they going to do to me?
Right.
I mean, you really couldn't get any lower in the queue as far as that. All the responsibility, none of the authority. So, what could they do? Fortunately, they did nothing.
Chris Barola.
I'll let the Navy chime in here. So I was stationed over in Italy on board a cruiser, USS Little Rock, and we were home ported away from the fleet in Naples up in a town called Gaeta. And I'd only been there about 4 months or so, whatever it was, but I remember it was cold, so I'm figuring it was like the fall going into winter. And we were, we worked on the ship and that we'd come back from somewhere, whatever the circumstances were, we were bored. So we just wanted to get the heck off the ship. So we get off the ship and we go over to the town square, which is around the curve, and you have the ship in the background. We're in the nice town square. The municipal, just to set the scene, the municipal building is there with a beautiful clock tower. And we grabbed some coffee and we were sitting at the tables there in the plaza, just drinking our coffees and talking. And a little car with one of those Shasta trailers, the classic trailers with the curved back. This is mid-70s here. Pulls up and parks right on the curb. And these two girls get out and they put a sign in front of the trailer. And now it's not what you think, guys. So they came over to us and they announced that they were collecting blood. And I spoke some Italian, so I was able to get in conversation with them. And I looked at the trailer and I looked at them, and they weren't in any uniforms. They were in jeans and sweaters. And they asked if we would donate blood. And I said yes. Because we want to spend time with these girls. But it was,
man.
No, that's what and I'm thinking to myself, that doesn't look like any place I would want to donate blood. I'm not sure I want to sleep in there.
I don't think I could be that desperate. But maybe.
I said it was a sailor story. And so we all went over there. My two buddies, they said, no, I don't think so. But so got in there. They made you comfortable on like this reclining this seat there, and we were bantering in Italian and English. They were practicing their English. I was trying to impress them with the Italian I spoke, and they took blood and this and that, and it was an interesting experience and fun to talk to them that. And when it was over, they stuck around a little longer, and then they moved on. And to this day, I think to myself, boy, I was that desperate that I got in that crazy trailer with these strange girls who had no uniforms whatsoever. To this day, I don't remember who they were collecting blood for, but I gave them a pint of blood, and I didn't even get a kiss on the cheek. What the hell was that about?
But there's a clone somewhere in the world of you.
God forbid. God forbid, but that's how desperate we were for companionship in those days. But pint of blood, not even a kiss and a cheek. That's terrible.
It's good advertising.
Yeah.
Yeah. Al Smith.
Yeah, I'll share a story. that was not funny at the time, but as I look back, I have to smile and have a laugh. It was the night of Tet, and the company I was in, we came back from a mission, and we were in a tent, and one of the guys had just come back from Hong Kong, and he had bought this, you may remember, this large TIAC tape recorder with two huge wheels. And on one wheel, it was Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. So we're listening to Sergeant Pepper's, and all of a sudden, all hell broke loose. We're in Quan Loy in the middle of the Michelin rubber plantation, and rockets are coming in. And I mean, when they hit trees, they exploded like deafening. Well, needless to say, the first rocket hit, and we set a record to get to the bunker. So we're all huddling in the bunker, and a rocket would hit, big explosion, and then it would be quiet. And in the background, we heard Lucy in the sky with diamonds. And then in came more rockets, and there'd be a silence, and you'd hear, I get high with a little help from my friends. And I thought to myself, here we are getting rocketed in Tet, and we had forgotten to turn off the TIAC tape recorder, and that was the background music. I can laugh about it today. It wasn't funny then.
Oh, man. Larry Kilmeyer, I'll ask you to unmute. I see your hand raised.
I'll keep it short, but the first one is real short, but anybody that's served in Vietnam and have a tower watch in a monsoon, and so I'm in a tower with another fella from my division, and when you got a new guy coming, instead of having, they'd only stay maybe an hour or so. They didn't have to stay the whole thing, but there's a dip in the road, and this young fellow's walking down, and honest to God, he's knee deep in water, where if you just walked around the road, you were out of the water. He climbs up the tower. He asks for permission. He climbs up the tower. And the first words out of his mouth, is this the rainy season? And the two of us looked at each other. And the guy I'm with just goes, no. This is the dry season. Wait a couple months and the rainy season will be here. And this poor kid I think he peed his pants. I mean, but that's just anybody that served, anybody that watched rain come down or rain go up or blow right and left, you understand. But it was just the other guy's humor. I mean, he was that quick. No, this isn't it. The other short story is right after I got there around Thanksgiving. And this might be, I got to guess, maybe around Christmas or New Year's. A couple of our NCOs, we'll say E6, E7s, have a Jeep, and they're driving back in the evening. It hasn't, from the Air Force base back to the Naval Air Facility, and they rolled the Jeep, and nobody got killed or anything. All these guys landed up in the sand, but the windshield's broken. Well, they brought it back to the base, and they hid it in a warehouse. But eventually the word got out, and our commanding officer wanted to see the Jeep, and so he kind of confiscated it and had it repaired, and new windshield, fenders, whatever. And our commanding officers, be tactful here. His girlfriend, hot lips, she was an Air Force nurse. He gave her that Jeep that became her personal vehicle to go from the Air Force base to his quarters on the base. So that the certain NCOs, they see it parked there one night and they don't start it up. They just put it in neutral and they pushed it behind the mess hall, as the story goes. I wasn't part of it, but this is the story. And there was a hole being dug. They were going to pour cement. And the Jeep went in, and the next day it was covered up. And so there's a Jeep where the mess hall was, cement poured over top of it. Jeep never to be seen or heard from ever again. So
wow.
That's a little bit of humor, A, B, but I'll try to keep it short. But just food for people's thought, crazy things that happen when you're in the service, things that you laugh about. Maybe only a handful of people to this day know about that. That's mine.
Thanks, Larry. One more, and then I have a small announcement for a VBC program. Go ahead. Let me ask you to unmute. Owner, there you go.
I wish I could change that, but I can't.
What's your name?
Bob McCormick.
Bob McCormick, right. Let me change it for you. Go ahead. It's your story.
Great. Wonderful. Anyway, I was with the 199th Light Infantry Brigade in a motor pool right across from brigade headquarters. I had just gotten there. They were having a big ceremony. So one of the sergeants in charge of the place told me to paint our outhouse. I go to the supply closet. I found 2 cans of paint. There's not enough of either color to do the job. So I go back to the sergeant. I tell him there's not enough paint. I said, there's half of each color. He says, mix them together. But that'll be, I don't care what color it is, just do it. Okie doke. It was white and red. The outhouse was pink. The next day they found enough paint to paint it green again. Me again.
And Al, go ahead, raise hand.
No, quick story. Larry will appreciate this. We're out in the search and destroy mission, and we're about noon, so we set up in a perimeter, and we're starting to eat some sea rations, whatever, and we see a monsoon coming. And so we put the ponchos on, put our heads down, whatever, and I've never seen it rain so fast, so much. And all of a sudden, my pants were wet, and I looked up, and literally the whole platoon was sitting in a pond. Literally a pond. It was like a lake, and we were sitting in it. That's how much rain came down that fast.
Justin Miller.
There we go. Well, mine is sort of a little bit. It was February 22nd of 1969, and I was with the 25th Division Aviation Battalion, Little Bears, and the Diamond Heads. And we'd had a hard day that day. Everybody had at least 13 hours on it for the day. We were back at the enlisted and OM clubs having cocktails. Coming on midnight, all of a sudden, everything came unglued. We found out that night that there were actually tunnels under Coochie. They were coming up out of everywhere on everything. So my thing was, it was what we call the night of the 2 majors. We're sent back to our company area, and everybody's supposed to get in the bunkers. We're all sitting on top of the bunkers, and this major comes through and says, "Get into your bunkers, get into your bunkers." And one of my good friends from Louisiana says, "Major, you get in the bunker. We know what's in there. We're not going in there." Then we get to Saigon, and another major there. We're in all kinds of things. John's in boots, shorts. He's got his weapon with him, whatever, and we're trying to get something to eat. And a major comes in, the best sergeant, the officers down there said, "No, we're not serving." And he went over to a second lieutenant and said, "Lieutenant, these men just evacuated all their helicopters from Coochie, Vietnam. You make sure they're fed now, or I'll come back and get you." None of us know who either major is. That's my major story for the day. But you would not have crawled in one of our bunkers, ever.
George, I'll ask you to unmute.
Yeah,
Thanks, Justin.
because I just had to, first of all, I'm not a veteran, guys, and I respect all of you. I really wish I had some of your experiences. I think that would have made me a much better person. As far as the pink outhouse goes, I thought that was only a Hollywood thing because last week, and some of you might have seen this, I saw the Cary Grant movie Operation Pacific and the Pink Submarine. How many of you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, yeah, this is a Hollywood thing. And I was just busting out laughing when I heard about the pink latrine or outhouse.
Yeah, it was true.
I'm going to share a quick thing right here. This is in the same vein of what we're talking about. So VBC After Dark. We thought of this program in the same vein of just like us telling jokes, telling funny things that happened. So Michael D'Angelo, as you see there, he was a Marine, post 9/11 Marine, came out, same thing we were talking about earlier, tough transition, just trying to figure out his life, and found it in comedy. The guys that he served with were like, you need to be a comedian, because he was always cracking jokes. And what he did was he created a nonprofit that goes around and does comedy shows for troops. He has a group of guys that they just like, they'll hop in a van from California and drive and go to the troops and tell jokes and lighten the mood. We're making this a VBC After Dark, and you might ask why. It's because we wanted it to be a little bit more mature. We're not going to stream this. We're not going to put it on YouTube or Facebook. This is registration required. Once we get the web page up, you guys will see it on our website. Make sure that you register for it. But as we say, a mature conversation. Michael didn't have a very good childhood. He grew up in Vegas. Very difficult childhood with drug-addled parents and tough childhood. He's also from that sort of like post 9/11 vet sort of mindset where it's like swearing kind of just happens the way he talks. It kind of emphasizes the story he's telling. So I want you all to be aware of that we're going to, since this is a VBC After Dark, we're going to have a little bit more mature content. If you're not offended by swearing, things like that, please feel free to jump in and join us. I'm sure we're going to open up the conversation a bit more because Michael's going to tell some of his story. He's going to tell some jokes. We're going to have a good time. Definitely bring some of that whiskey that you got there, David, because it's going to be a chill evening. But we don't want anybody to like show up and expect like our normal sort of like buttoned up program. We might have a little bit of a looser tongue here in this program. So again, VBC After Dark, February 29th. I think it's going to be really fun. I've talked with Michael a couple times. He's a great guy. So I hope that you guys can join us for that. Hear some jokes and also tell some more of your jokes because I'm sure there are some that we sort of like keep down a bit. Maybe we don't tell those jokes, but that might be a night. VBC After Dark. Maybe you try it out. You got a room. Give it a
Sean,
shot.
what time is that program going to start?
We're going to do it at 7 p.m. We thought about doing it as a later show, but we are going to do it at 7 p.m. He's going to invite some of his crew. I'm hoping to get some more post 9/11 vets on our program. We'd like to get a younger group in the room if we can. But just so you guys know, it's something new we're trying. This sort of VBC After Dark. Unbutton the collar a little bit, hang out and relax for a bit, and maybe tell some more mature stories potentially as well. Go ahead, Glenn.
If I could just, I saw reading the chat 2 or 3 posts about the movie Nuremberg, and just to whet your appetite to come on again for our Thursday night program on Nuremberg. When I spoke with Professor Barrett today, I asked him about it, and he was very restrained in his comments as to the accuracy of that movie. Great acting, great drama, but historically totally inaccurate. So, I enjoyed the movie, but from a historical perspective, it does a lot of injustice to several of the characters in the movie.
Thank you, Glenn. Nancy, you'll have the final thought on the jokes, and then Barb will finish us out with Barb.
Yeah, I need to address the pink latrine thing. The donut dollies in Vietnam always had a terrible time when we were on fire bases, taking care of business because there was no place that was covered. And so on one fire base, and I can't remember where it is, the guys built us a latrine and painted it pink, and the girls loved it.
That's awesome. Barb, I'm going to go ahead and share your PowerPoint here. Go ahead.
Yeah, so before we go into that real fast, tomorrow is
Fort Chaplain's Day.
Yeah, Fort Chaplain's Day, and I just wanted to share that I had an opportunity to participate in an event with 5th and 6th graders east of Cleveland about 3 or 4 years ago. The February 3rd program had been snowed out that day. The kids had off that day, so we did it in May. And by then, my husband and I learned a lot about the Fort Chaplains program, the story of heroics. We'd even been to the Chapel of the Fort Chaplains. And so at this program, the students, 5th and 6th graders, did a marvelous job inside the church, right there on the altar. It was a beautiful event. I got to sing 2 verses of the Navy hymn. And 2 lovely young ladies created and read aloud a homemade poem about the Fort Chaplains. So a couple of weeks later, I had arranged with the teacher and Michelle Nolfi from the chapel for the kids to actually read again, because we went back for their graduation practice, And they stood at the microphone and read that poem again from Michelle Nolfi while she was at the Chapel of the Four Chaplains. It was an incredible experience, that. So I couldn't find any place to have go anywhere tomorrow for the Chapel of Four Chaplains ceremony. And don't you just know, we're going to be in church anyway tomorrow. I had texted our friend Lynn Nguyen, our Vietnam veteran doll baby. And when I text her a little message, she texted me back her father's obituary. He passed away just a couple of days ago. And so I put this little PowerPoint together. My husband and I are going to drive there tomorrow. So we'll be thinking of the chaplains as well. But when I was exploring, I came across this slide, and my husband and I missed this particular Breakfast Club event. So anyway, you can go to the next slide. That's when the author was on. So it'll inspire us to read his books. Here are a couple of pictures that Lynn sent us. And the way we met Lynn, again, VBC, very best chat, very best club, was when my husband we attended the program last year at the Heinz Center, the Vietnam Veterans Era Recognition Day. And Lynn came up and spoke at the mic for a few moments. And so after that program, she and I became best friends. And she had never been to Indiantown Gap before, her very first home in the United States. And so we met her, I think maybe 2 weeks after the Veterans Recognition program there in Heinz Center in Pittsburgh. So she had texted me these, obviously getting ready for the funeral tomorrow for her father. She texted me these two photos, and in the photo on the right, in the white, the girls in the white, I think she's the one on the left. And I'm going to say she's also the one on the left in that photo too. I'm just guessing. She's looks like her. So it was so nice for her to send me those pictures. And then this is in fact a slide with the pictures from that program last year. And it was just such a pleasure to meet her. And I remember that her parents were sitting, I think, in the back row at that hugely attended event. And I thought, oh, you have to meet them. And of course, that never happened. It was crazy busy afterwards. So, and that's her beautiful daughter, Joanne. So the next slide, if you want to, this is a postcard. I'm sorry. Yeah, a greeting card that I made for all of us when we met at the Indiantown Gap Museum. And there you see Charlie Oleg. He was the National Guardsman veteran and the museum curator. So if you've never been to the Indiantown Gap Museum, I strongly recommend you going. It's this little barracks of a museum, and it's 2 floors, and it's just packed with marvelous information. And Mr. Oleg is just so kind and patient and readily available to answer questions. And he even had some books set out for us with Vietnamese writing. And we looked through some books, and she couldn't find any pictures of her parents. But anyway, it was a great visit. She brought both of her children on that visit. And go ahead. You may go to the next slide. I know we're running out of time. So this is, I think this is from this article at the very bottom. You can read it. It's from penlive.com. And I think Todd may have either contributed to this one or maybe the other one. That's okay.
There we go. Yeah.
And so this is her father. And I learned how to pronounce his name. It's NYOP pronunciation, Nguyen Nguyen. And then in Vietnamese, it's rest in peace. So she tells on this page the story of her coming over here and how they were sponsored by the church, actually, and parishioners from the church where we're going to go tomorrow for the funeral, and how successful that their family became, and how kindness and love always prevail. So anyway, it was just a great experience. And then this is just a reminder, when people pass away, they have the obituaries online, and it's usually like legacy.com or leave a memory. And this is what I wrote this morning. And I just wanted to share why I think it's important to do this, because especially if you can't go to the funeral. I was with our 94-year-old friend from Shamokin, Pennsylvania. We were visiting with her, and we were talking about her husband, who was a veteran, and he had died years ago. And of course, she had no idea of how to use a computer. And I said, "Oh, let's look at legacy.com." Well, she had never heard of that. Nobody had ever read to her the comments, the memories that people had offered about her husband, an Army veteran. So I read them aloud to her, and she was like so appreciative. And we even contacted some of the people, 20 years later after I read those, that they were written, and we were able to find some of them, and she was able to actually speak with them. So anyway, just a couple things about our wonderful Lynn Wynn. Would never have met him without Veterans Breakfast Club, like so many things that Veterans Breakfast Club has brought my husband and me, and just always so grateful. And also a tribute again to the Vietnam veterans who had rescued her family, and there she was 51 years later, actually got to Fort Indian Town Gap again, her very first town home in the United States. Okay, thank you so much, everybody.
Barb, thank you. Thank you for sharing. Everyone, thanks for a great program this evening. Sorry again about the Zoom bomber. It happens, but appreciate you all sticking around and telling some good stories. I think we had a wonderful conversation this evening. We're really looking forward to Thursday night's history lesson with Glenn. So hopefully see you all there. Brad, thank you for contributing. Ben as well. Everybody that contributed tonight, thanks for being on. And we'll see you all soon. Stay warm out there.
Thank you.